one broken bike, one poor boy, and one millionaire who didn't believe in miracles. But that night on an empty road, destiny wrote a story no one could have imagined. The evening sky was turning shades of orange and crimson as the sun sank behind the tall buildings of New York's suburban edge. The streets were quieter than usual, a soft breeze carrying the scent of hot asphalt and faint gasoline. On an otherwise empty road, a roar that once dominated the silence sputtered, coughed, and finally died into nothing. Daniel Carter pulled off his helmet, glaring at the lifeless BMW S10ORR beneath him. At 35, Daniel was used to control over his business empire, his employees, even the machines he drove. He was a man who had never been told no without finding a way to buy a yes. But tonight, his prized possession had betrayed him. He cursed under his breath, kicking the stand down and sliding off the bike. Not now. Of all nights. Not now. His phone was already out, his well-manicured fingers dialing numbers with practiced speed. Within minutes, a black service van pulled up. Two men in mechanic uniforms jumped out, tools in hand, eager to impress a man of Daniel Carter's wealth and reputation. "What seems to be the problem, Mr. Carter?" one of them asked, almost bowing. Daniel gestured impatiently at the bike. It stalled. "Figure it out." The men got to work, their tools clinking in the fading light. Daniel crossed his arms, pacing the sidewalk. He hated being stranded, hated feeling powerless. Money usually solved problems within seconds. This, however, dragged on. After 30 minutes of adjustments, checks, and whispers, the mechanics stepped back, defeated. "Sir," one of them stammered, we can't figure it out. The system's not responding. It's too complex." Daniel's eyes burned with irritation. "You're supposed to be professionals. What good are you if you can't fix one bike?" He waved them away, disgusted. The van pulled off, leaving him alone with the silent beast of metal. Across the street, the neon glow of Harlem Eats Diner flickered to life. From its back door, a young man stepped out, wiping his hands on a stained apron. Jamal Brown, 23, smelled faintly of soap and fried food. His shoulders slumped from exhaustion after another long shift, but his eyes still carried that restless energy of someone who hadn't yet surrendered to the world. He noticed the stranded biker instantly. Everyone knew Daniel Carter, the millionaire entrepreneur, who rode machines that cost more than entire apartment blocks. Jamal's first instinct was to keep walking. Men like Daniel didn't see people like him. They looked through them. But then Jamal's gaze shifted to the BMW. He had seen it once in a textbook, studied its engineering in diagrams, admired its precision in late night YouTube videos, while dreaming of one day working on such machines. To him, it wasn't just a bike. It was art, a breathing creature that demanded respect. He froze, torn between fear and fascination. A poor boy in a grease-stained apron approaching a millionaire. It sounded ridiculous. Yet, as he looked at the frustrated man kicking the ground, something inside Jamal whispered, "This is your chance. Don't walk away." Jamal inhaled deeply, wiped his hands one last time, and crossed the street. "Sir," he said cautiously, "I think I can help." Daniel turned, eyebrows raised. His gaze swept over Jamal's cheap uniform, his worn-out shoes, the sweat glistening on his skin. He almost laughed. "You? Kid, this bike costs more than your entire building. Professional mechanics couldn't handle it. And you think you can?" Jamal stood his ground, though his throat tightened. "I study mechanical engineering. I've spent my life fixing things no one else wanted to touch. Just give me a chance. If I fail, you lose nothing. But if I succeed—" He hesitated, then added firmly, "You'll know you underestimated me." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. The street grew silent, only the faint buzz of the diner sign filling the air. Finally, Daniel smirked. 10 minutes. Impress me. Jamal nodded, crouching beside the bike. His fingers trembled slightly. But as he touched the machine, calmness washed over him. He had been doing this since he was a child, helping his father fix broken down trucks in a cramped garage, before illness stole his father away. Every bolt, every wire was a language he understood. He pulled a small wrench from his pocket, a tool he always carried, a symbol of his father's memory. Daniel watched, amused. "You're seriously using that? A toy wrench on a machine like this?" Jamal ignored him, focusing on the engine. He listened to the faint clicks, traced the wiring, and noticed what the mechanics had missed: a loose coil and a cracked connection disrupting the ignition. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Jamal saw it. Minutes later, he wiped his forehead, stood up, and said quietly, "Try it now." Daniel sighed, slid on his helmet, and turned the key. For a moment, silence. Then a cough, a growl, and finally the deep, commanding roar of the BMW filled the air. The engine purred, alive once more. Daniel's jaw clenched as he shut it off again. He removed his helmet slowly, studying Jamal with new eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice lower now. Jamal met his gaze. "Just someone who refuses to stay small." The roar of the engine still echoed in Daniel's ears. He stared at Jamal for a long time, as if trying to measure the weight of the boy's words. The arrogance he usually carried was replaced, briefly, by curiosity. "You know what this machine costs?" Daniel asked, finally. "More than I'll ever earn in 10 lifetimes." Jamal answered honestly. "And you still dared to touch it?" Jamal shrugged. "If you fear the price tag, you'll never learn the machine." A small chuckle escaped Daniel, surprising even himself. He hadn't expected wisdom from a boy in a grease-stained apron. For the first time that night, he felt respect instead of irritation. Daniel extended his hand. "Daniel Carter." Jamal shook it firmly. "Jamal Brown." The handshake was brief, but something electric passed between them. A silent acknowledgement that they were from two different worlds, yet connected by a single spark of fate. Daniel slipped his helmet back on and swung his leg over the bike. "You've got talent, Jamal, but talent alone doesn't change the world." The engine roared as Daniel twisted the throttle. Jamal stepped back, shielding his face from the sudden gust of exhaust. In seconds, Daniel disappeared down the street, leaving Jamal standing alone in the glow of the diner's neon lights. For a moment, Jamal's chest swelled with pride. He had done the impossible. He had fixed the unfixable. A millionaire had shaken his hand. But as the sound of the BMW faded, reality settled back in. He was still a broke dishwasher. His rent was still overdue. His mother was still drowning in bills. The spark of hope flickered, but the weight of his life pressed down harder than ever. Inside the diner, his manager shouted, "Jamal, break's over. Get back to work." Jamal sighed, slipping his wrench back into his pocket. He returned to the greasy kitchen, the sound of clattering plates and sizzling oil replacing the roar of the BMW for a brief moment. He had touched greatness. Now he was back in the shadows. As he scrubbed dishes late into the night, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that he had been tested. That maybe, just maybe, the universe was preparing him for something greater. But greatness never came easy. And Jamal's hardest days were only just beginning. The night air was cooler now, and the city had grown quieter. Jamal walked home slowly, his steps heavy, but his mind restless. The roar of the BMW replayed again and again in his head. He had touched greatness, even if for just a few minutes. A man like Daniel Carter had looked him in the eyes. shaken his hand, and called him talented. As he reached his small apartment complex in Harlem, Jamal paused outside the rusted iron gate. A group of neighborhood kids played basketball under a broken street lamp. They laughed, their sneakers squeaking on the cracked pavement. Jamal smiled faintly. He used to be one of them, carefree and full of energy, before life had forced responsibility on his shoulders. Inside the apartment, his mother sat at the kitchen table. The room smelled faintly of bleach. Her hands always smelled that. Way after a long day of cleaning offices, stacks of bills were spread across the table like soldiers in formation, all demanding attention. "You're late," she said, though her voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. "Work was heavy," Jamal replied. He hesitated, then added, "I fixed something tonight." Something big. His mother looked up, eyebrows raised. "Fixed what? Another fryer at the diner?" "No," Jamal said softly, almost whispering. "I fixed a BMW's 1996, Daniel Carter's bike. The Millionaire." She stared at him for a moment, then laughed bitterly. "And did he pay you for it?" Jamal's smile faded. "No, he just left." "Exactly," she sighed. "These rich men. They take what they want, and they never look back. Don't build your hopes on them, Jamal. Dreams don't pay rent." Jamal's chest tightened. He didn't want to argue, but inside, he wanted to scream that this wasn't just a dream. He had touched that machine, brought it back to life when everyone else had failed. That had to mean something. But as he looked at the unpaid bills on the table and the weary lines on his mother's face, his pride felt like a fragile glass about to shatter. He went to his small bedroom, a space barely large enough for a bed and a pile of textbooks. As he lay down, the city's distant sirens and honking cars lulled him. Still, before sleep claimed him. One thought remained. Daniel Carter had seen him. And maybe, just maybe, that would matter someday. The next few weeks were brutal. At the diner, Jamal worked double shifts, scrubbing pans until his hands blistered. The manager, a stout man with little patience, yelled constantly, "Faster, Jamal!" Customers don't wait forever. At school, his professors criticized him for being late on assignments. One of them, Dr. Miller, shook his head in disappointment. "Mr. Brown, intelligence is useless without discipline. If you can't keep up, maybe engineering isn't for you." Jamal wanted to scream, to tell them that he wasn't lazy, he was drowning. But words never came. Instead, he nodded silently and carried the weight. Nights were no better. The sound of his mother coughing in her room kept him awake. Medical bills piled higher, and his own tuition deadline loomed like a storm. Some nights, Jamal skipped dinner just so his mother could eat. One evening, while walking home, he passed by a luxury dealership downtown. Through the glass, he saw rows of gleaming cars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, BMWs, all shining like jewels under bright lights. A couple in expensive clothes laughed as a salesman handed them keys. Jamal pressed his hand against the cold glass. He wasn't envious of the wealth itself. What he longed for was the freedom it represented. Freedom from bills. Freedom from being invisible. Freedom to be seen as someone valuable. He pulled his hand back, staring at the reflection of himself in the glass. A tired young man in a worn-out jacket. For a brief moment, he almost believed his mother's words. Maybe dreams didn't pay rent. Maybe he should just give up. But then he remembered the roar of the BMW under his hands. The way Daniel's eyes had changed when the engine came alive. That memory kept him standing. As he walked away, Jamal whispered to himself, "Not yet. I'm not done yet." 2 months passed since the night Jamal had fixed Daniel's bike. Life had only grown harder. He barely scraped enough to pay part of the rent, and the landlord's warnings grew louder each week. One Saturday afternoon, Jamal was in the back of the diner, fixing a broken dishwasher. Grease stained his arms, and sweat trickled down his face. The kitchen was noisy with clattering pans and sizzling oil. Suddenly, his manager barged in. "Jamal," he barked. "There's someone outside asking for you. Don't keep them waiting." Confused, Jamal wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out into the sunlight. There, parked in front of the diner, was the same BMW, polished, gleaming, flawless. Beside it stood Daniel Carter, dressed in a crisp suit, sunglasses reflecting the sky. The sight froze Jamal. He hadn't expected to ever see the man again. Around them, customers and pedestrians slowed, whispering. What was a millionaire doing here? Daniel removed his sunglasses and smirked. "Miss me?" Jamal folded his arms. "You left me standing on the street that night. Didn't think I'd see you again." Daniel tilted his head. "And yet, here I am. I didn't come to thank you. I came because I need you again." Jamal frowned. "The bike's fine now." "Not for the bike," Daniel said, his voice steady. "For me?" Jamal's heartbeat quickened. "What do you mean?" Daniel stepped closer. "I have a challenge, something that none of my engineers have been able to solve. I want to see if you're different. If that night wasn't just luck." Jamal hesitated. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind. These men don't care about us. His pride screamed at him not to be used again. But curiosity burned brighter than fear. "Finally," he said, "if this is some kind of game, I walk away." Daniel's smile widened. "Good. I don't play games. I test people." He handed Jamal a spare helmet. The boy stared at it, then slowly slipped it on. The crowd murmured as Jamal climbed onto the back of the BMW. The machine roared to life, and, with a thunderous growl, Daniel sped them both into the unknown award, a test that would measure not just Jamal's skill, but his entire destiny. The city blurred past as Daniel's BMW sliced through traffic. Jamal held on tightly, his heart pounding with every turn. The roar of the engine drowned his thoughts, yet questions raced in his head. Why had Daniel come back? Why him? After nearly 40 minutes, Daniel slowed, steering into a private road lined with tall trees. Ahead, a massive steel gate loomed. With a silent buzz, it opened, revealing something Jamal could only describe as a dream. A sprawling garage stretched out like an airplane hangar, filled with rows of gleaming machines. Exotic cars with polished chrome, vintage classics preserved like jewels, and prototypes that looked like they belonged to the future. Jamal removed his helmet slowly, his jaw dropping. This is insane." Daniel smirked, proud of his collection. "Welcome to my sanctuary. Most people see me as a businessman. Few see this side of me, but you've earned a peek." At the center of the garage stood a sleek, unfinished sports car. Its hood was raised, wires hanging loose like veins exposed. Engineers in lab coats moved around it, murmuring in frustration. Daniel's smile faded. "This is our company's pride. Millions invested, years of work, and yet it refuses to run." He looked directly at Jamal. "I want to see if you can do what my entire team cannot." Jamal felt the weight of those words crush down on him. This wasn't a simple roadside repair. This was a stage where failure would humiliate him beyond repair. But as fear coiled in his stomach, another thought rose louder. If he succeeded, his life would change forever. He inhaled deeply. "I'll try." Daniel nodded, stepping aside. The room grew silent. Engineers paused, crossing their arms, skeptical of the young man in worn-out shoes, daring to step into their world. Jamal crouched by the car, his fingers tracing the cold metal. He closed his eyes briefly, remembering his father's voice. "Machines don't lie, son," they whisper. listen closely. Hours passed. Jamal's shirt clung to him with sweat as he worked, ignoring the judgmental stares of the engineers. He checked the wiring, traced the fuel system, tested sensors. Every time he thought he had found the issue, the engine remained stubbornly silent. Frustration gnawed at him. His hands trembled, and doubt crept into his thoughts. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe he didn't belong here. Then, as he leaned back, closing his eyes, something clicked in his memory. A class lecture about fuel dynamics. A formula he had scribbled in a notebook weeks ago. He rushed back to the engine, examining the fuel system again. And there it was, a tiny misalignment, so small even advanced scans had missed it. His heart raced as he adjusted the valve, tightened connections, and reassembled the system. The moment of truth arrived. Jamal wiped his greasy hands on his jeans, then pressed the ignition. Silence. Then, a low rumble. The engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared alive, steady and strong. The car vibrated with power, lights flickering on as if awakening from a long sleep. Gasps filled the room. Engineers exchanged stunned looks. Daniel stepped forward, his usually composed face showing rare awe. Jamal stepped back, chest heaving, eyes wide. "It's alive," he whispered. Daniel's gaze locked on him. For a long moment, he said nothing, only watching the young man who had done the impossible. Finally, he spoke, voice steady. "You're not just talented, Jamal. You're extraordinary." The words washed over Jamal like water on dry soil. For the first time, he truly believed it. The next morning, Jamal found himself in Daniel's office. Towering glass skyscraper overlooking the city. He sat nervously on a leather chair, his calloused hands folded in his lap. Daniel entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Jamal. "Don't worry, it's not poisoned," he joked. Jamal chuckled nervously. "You didn't have to bring me here. I was just doing what I know." Daniel sat across from him, his expression serious now. "Do you know why I came back for you? Why I pulled you out of that diner?" Jamal shook his head. "Because talent without pressure is meaningless," Daniel said firmly. "I wanted to see if you could survive the wait. And you did, better than anyone I've ever seen." Jamal swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Daniel leaned forward. "I run one of the biggest automobile companies in this country. I have money, I have engineers, I have designers. But what I don't have is someone who sees machines the way you do. You're not just an engineer in training. You're an innovator. And I want you on my team." Jamal blinked, stunned. "You want to hire me?" "Full-time," Daniel confirmed. "A paid position. And when you graduate, a permanent place as an engineer. No more washing dishes. No more barely surviving. You'll finally be where you belong." Tears pricked Jamal's eyes, but he fought them back. All the nights of hunger, the ridicule from classmates, his mother's weary face, it all came rushing back. This wasn't charity. This was recognition. "Sir," Jamal whispered, "this changes everything." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, Jamal, you changed everything. I'm just giving you the platform you already earned." Weeks melted into months. Jamal now walked into Carter Motors laboratories every morning with a badge clipped proudly to his shirt. Jamal Brown Jr., engineer. The same coworkers who had once doubted him now sought his input. His ideas, once scribbled in notebooks, now shaped real machines. At home, his mother's tears finally came from joy rather than exhaustion. Jamal paid off debts, repaired their apartment, and even bought her new furniture she never thought she'd own. For the first time in years, she slept without worry. At school, professors who once doubted him now praised him. His classmates whispered in awe when they saw his name associated with Carter Motors. The boy they mocked for being The broke dishwasher was now a rising star. In the engineering world, one evening, Jamal and Daniel stood side by side in the garage, testing the prototype again. The car purred flawlessly. Daniel glanced at Jamal, pride in his eyes. "You know," Daniel said, "when I was your age, I had money handed to me, but I lost something in the process: hunger. You remind me of what I forgot." Jamal smiled. "And you remind me that sometimes all someone needs is a chance." They shook hands again, but this time it wasn't a handshake of strangers. It was the handshake of mentor and student, of two men tied together by fate and machines. 1 year later, Jamal stood in a black gown and cap, the sun warm on his face as he walked across the university stage. His mother sat in the front row, clapping through her tears. Daniel sat beside her, arms crossed but eyes gleaming with pride. Jamal Brown, the announcer's voice boomed, graduating with honors in mechanical engineering. The crowd erupted in applause. Jamal's chest swelled as he accepted his degree. He had carried himself from dishwater to destiny. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed Daniel. "Mr. Carter, why did you hire a student from Harlem with no degree at the time?" Daniel smiled, his voice calm but firm. "Because greatness doesn't care about your background. It doesn't care about your bank account. It only cares about fire." And Jamal carried fire. The story spread across the city, inspiring countless young men and women who felt trapped by poverty. Jamal became a symbol of hope, proof that even one broken night on an empty road could rewrite destiny. Later that evening, Jamal rode Daniel's BMW down the same street where their story began. The engine roared under him, not just as a machine, but as a living reminder that broken moments often lead to the strongest futures. He whispered to himself, the wind carrying his words into the night. "I'll never forget where I came from, and I'll never stop moving forward." Moral of the story is that no matter how poor your beginnings, no matter how heavy your struggles, if you believe in your gift and never give up, the world will eventually recognize your worth. Like and subscribe the channel for more interesting videos.